My name is Ogechika Alozie, and I am an immigrant. I'm not necessarily the type of immigrant that you're expecting. I'm a digital immigrant. Some of you are already asking, what's a digital immigrant? What's he talking about? If you really look at the definition, it's just a person that has not been engaged with technology for the majority of their life, either through education, personal interaction, or their professional interactions. The common example that's used is a grandmother and a grandson. For example, my mom and my son. Well, my mom is a college professor. She knows how to use a computer. She's not engaged with Snapchat. She doesn't use WhatsApp. She doesn't use a host of things until recently. And on the other hand, her grandson, 6 years old, attached to a tablet when we don't kick him out the door, and he swipes his way through life, back and forth. That's the example. Now you may be saying, you're a doctor, man. You can't be a digital anything. You can't be an immigrant. Well, that's not necessarily true. I was born in Nigeria, came to the United States when I was very young. Both my parents were PhD students at the University of Minnesota, grew up there, and then at some point in time they decided, you probably need to go back to Nigeria. Get in touch with your family, get in touch with friends, and so I returned, went to medical school, learned a lot of things. Eventually I returned to the University of Minnesota, did a master's in public health, infectious disease fellowship, and here and there I learned some things about technology. In 2010, myself and my family moved to El Paso, where I was the director of the HIV clinic there, and also became the chief medical informatics officer. And so that kind of transition, imagine if you were to be put to sleep today, close your eyes, and be woken up 14 years later. Would the world around you be the same? Probably not. Would it be similar? Definitely. Some of the roads would be there, some of your friends would be there, but the things around you technologically would be different. And when we talk about digital immigration, that's how immigrants feel as well as digital immigrants. Slowly but insidiously, the things around them start to change where the world around them is a little bit different. You may say then, what's next? The process of acculturation. Being engaged in a place's social norms and cultures. Technology allows us to engage that process of acculturation. And that's what I'm here to talk about specifically around healthcare. This is the world that we used to know. You used to scrapbook, you used to put pictures on the wall, you had Post-it notes, maybe you had a rotary phone. It's all disappearing step by step. Those of you who know Montana Avenue in El Paso know that right next to Fab Labs there's a rotary phone. Quite amazing actually, but we'll talk about that another day. And yet these things, step by step, have been eroded by technology. And why is that? If you were to wake up 14 years later, you would realize that the future is no longer what it used to be. Convenience is winning. And we as consumers, both from a healthcare standpoint and every other standpoint, need to do the things that we do more efficiently, more quickly, more integrated. And whether it's taxi, travel, entertainment, restaurants, consumer products, and healthcare, I ask you today, if you were to go outside and call a cab, you wouldn't go, taxi, what'd you do? Uber, exactly. You go online, you don't call a travel agent, you go to Kayak or whatever it may be. Entertainment, whether it's StubHub, whether it's Live Nation, those are all the tools that we use today to do things that just 4 to 5 years ago were very, very different. Once upon a time, you had to know the maitre d'. Get a corner table, get the best bottle of wine, now you go on Open Table. And not only do you go on Open Table, you leave a review, so that the restaurant knows whether their service was up to par and how to improve it the next time. Right? Consumer products. Amazon will get you anything in essentially 24 to 48 hours. It's now the largest retailer in America. Used to be Walmart, now it's Amazon. In some cities in this country, a drone will get it to you in under 2 hours. And of course in healthcare, you all know that it's, exactly. And why is that? It's not for want of trying. It's not as if WebMD has not given it a shot. It's not as if Hippocrates has not given it a shot, but it's just not there. Maybe it's because of security. A recent Kaiser study published about a month or two ago actually showed that when you ask Americans what are their concerns about healthcare, about 50% do believe that security is important. They don't want somebody accessing their information unauthorized. But the same people polled, 80% believed that it was more important for their physician, their provider, their healthcare network to have an online medical record and be able to transfer that information from one provider to another. And that is where technology allows us to go that next direction. Mobilization. A lot of people have talked today about education, moving people and populations forward, and that's great. I would tell them, as long as you're not buying a desktop, we're on the same page. The desktop is dead. Anybody that's buying a desktop in 2016, move on. Find somebody else to lead that organization because they're going the wrong direction. Mobile is the future. And the reason mobile is the future is because of this. This is how we used to do things on our desk. We used to have a rotary phone. We used to be stuck to that phone and not be able to go back and forth. Don't get me wrong, the economy and lots of things work just well, but that's not how healthcare is anymore. I give an example specifically about some work that I did in 2013 when I was the director of the HIV clinic at Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center, El Paso. Average age of my patients in the HIV clinic, around 25. And those of you who are parents out there know that if you text your kid these days, they may respond to you, but if you call them, you'll get nothing. And so we would call our patients all day, all night. Call centers set up to do just that, the thing that nobody really does anymore, make phone calls. However, we'd send them letters, same thing. So we had a University of Texas El Paso intern, and he said, hey doc, let's do something different. Let's engage with our patients on their level. Not the way we do it institutionally, but the way they're used to. We use Google Voice as an application, and within 6 months of sending text messages to our patients, 72 and 24 hours before they came into clinic, we reduced the no-show rate by 60%. That's real economic value. That's real healthcare value. That's real systems with a free application that a college student set up and the organization hadn't progressed to that level at that point in time. And it's not just that. Many of you out there have iWatches. You have Garmin's, Fitbits, whatever the case may be. You're being monitored at every point in time. There's some good things and some bad things to that. But imagine the power of data. Imagine the power of your healthcare in your hands, not somebody else's hands, but in your hands. And then imagine what you can do with it. Some people will say, well, these are just toys. They're not medical grade. That's great. But I would also put to you that week after Pokemon came out, people that had jawbones increased their steps by 62%. That's real movement. That's the kind of movement that can help you lose 40 pounds, which I once lost and gained back. I'll buy another jawbone, I guess. But again, the point is that that's real efficacy. Maybe we go to those high schools in El Paso, and maybe there's an obesity epidemic, and we say, we're gonna give you a $20 or $30 wristband, we're gonna put some artificial intelligence on it, virtual reality, augmented reality, and we'll actually be able to monitor what you're doing with your healthcare and make it fun again. Maybe that's the kind of thing that after you do a knee operation, or a hip operation, you have an app connected to whatever your device du jour is, and again, augmented reality allows you to do your physical therapy on your terms, right? That's the way healthcare should be. That's what I really think it demands to be. In fact, I think it's no longer acceptable, whether it's in El Paso, anywhere across the nation, for you to drive 30 minutes, for example, here from Horizon to where most of our hospitals and clinics are. In El Paso traffic, with all the construction that's happening, park in a parking lot where you might not find a spot, go into the aptly named waiting room, which you'll probably wait a long time at, and then be given a clipboard. What's on that clipboard? Paper. Reams and reams of paper with your address, your phone number, your name, your social security number. In this day where internet fraud and security are some of the top priorities across the nation, we're putting people's social security numbers on a clipboard? That makes no sense. I can pull out my phone right now and purchase 10 things in the next 3 minutes, and it's not gonna ask me a thing. My phone's encrypted by my thumbprint. If I have an Android phone, like a Note 7, and the battery hasn't exploded, I can use my iris. Sorry, Samsung. But again, those are the technological pieces that we already use day to day. Those are the ways that we should engage with healthcare. And if we do that, we can start to move that proverbial needle from people that are uncomfortable, the immigrants, to people that are more comfortable in healthcare. A lot of times people say, you know, oh yeah, this can't happen. What are you talking about, man? We don't have the money, we don't have the resources, the political will. You may be right, I may be right. I think one of the things that you have to understand, though, is that all of us in this process have to have a little bit of humility. I ask you to turn to your neighbor right now and tell them what the color of the yield sign in your neighborhood is. I'll give you 3 seconds to do it. Sir? Yeah. Yellow, right? Most people say yellow. And yet, the yield sign in the United States of America has not been yellow since 1971. That change is older than me. And I use it, it's funny, but think about this. Slowly but surely, a change that you would have bet reasonable amount of money on right now has happened right before your eyes. You didn't notice it, and you would have bet on it. That's exactly what technology has done for us. When I left the United States in 1988, as a teenager, compact discs were the way to listen to music. Right? Went to Nigeria, came back 14 years later. How cool did I think I was? Had my yellow little Walkman, was bouncing around the campus of the University of Minnesota, had all my CDs in it. Google was in its infancy, Amazon, eBay, Napster. 3 years later, CDs were almost dead. We were dealing in MP3s, and now nobody even uses MP3s. You're streaming. There's a reason you have data. And those are the things that we really have to think about. What are the ways that we're going to move the needle? Because if we don't find a way in healthcare and education and a host of things to be technological natives, then we go the way of Kodak. We go the way of Blockbuster. Those of you who are sports fans, you will say, well, I'll give you an example of ESPN. ESPN is the largest sports cable network in the world, essentially. And over the last 3 years, they've lost $2.5 billion. How, you may ask? Because they've refused to change their pricing model around the way that they sell information. And so while they're tied to cable, Netflix has arisen. Amazon Prime has arisen. A host of other things has arisen. And that's why we need to take technology and make it that naturalization process. I said in the beginning, I'm an immigrant. I'm now a permanent resident. One day, maybe I'll be blessed enough to be an American citizen. But if you look at the immigrants that come into the United States, only 7% ever become naturalized citizens. Technology can beat that number. It has to beat that number. It's imperative upon us that we use technology to move people that are immigrants into that native stage. And if we can't get them to natives, at least make them residents in healthcare technologically. Why does it make sense that somebody that may be bedridden or moribund, whatever the case may be, has to drive in what I described? Why can't they engage with telemedicine? Why can't they do that on a laptop, their phone? I put it to you that if you're in the healthcare sector today and you're building brick and mortar, great. That'll work for a couple of years, maybe 5 years. But at a point in time, you know who's also building brick and mortar? CVS. And CVS can do it faster and easier than you because they can put it on more corners. They own Minute Clinic, and that person that has to drive 40 minutes to your clinic will drive 5 minutes to CVS, go into the Minute Clinic, get their prescription in the same place, buy some other stuff, not cigarettes, and then go home. That's the patient experience, and that's what technology can do for us. A lot of the presenters today have talked about education. They've talked about enlifting people, and I think it's important. Those of you who are in the audience today, those of you watching elsewhere that are leaders, the answer is probably not going to come from you, and that's part of that humility. But you can enable the answer. You can enable the next generation. Right? I see it every day when patients come to us and say, I don't have access to your patient portal. I really want to see it because I need to see a doctor in California, in Texas, in Minnesota, across the world. That patient portal allows them to transfer that information and show it to another provider. The way we want to use education is to ensure that at our medical school, at medical schools across the country, we ensure that the next generation of healthcare providers, the healthcare digital natives, are able to bring the Medicare generation growing old day by day that are mostly immigrants and naturalize them so they feel comfortable in their own healthcare. And that's really the goal. I think we've talked about a lot of things, and I tell a story occasionally where it could be any hospital, it could be any clinic, but it happened here. A patient walked into his primary care doctor's room, saw the doctor for an upper respiratory infection, and then went home. 2 weeks later, he wasn't feeling well, had some abdominal pain, some diarrhea, was seen at an ER, and was given another antibiotic. A week later, developed more abdominal pain, admitted, had a colonoscopy. Now, As an infectious disease doctor, I would have said, hey, hold off on that colonoscopy, but they didn't have that information. The hospital didn't have his primary care doctor's information. And so what happened? They went on and did a colonoscopy. The colonoscopy perforated his intestines. He was admitted to the ICU. He had renal failure. He had a renal biopsy. He bled into his kidney. Oncology, hematology came to see him because he had a bleeding disorder. All told, 3 months later, $500,000 bill later, he filed for bankruptcy. And this is a story that happens everywhere in this country. It's not a one-place story. Some will say, well, technology wouldn't have saved that. I say, well, it might have. If the secondary doctor had known that his first doctor gave him a simple antibiotic for an upper respiratory tract infection, and he had a condition known as Clostridium difficile-associated diarrhea, he would have given him a different antibiotic, treated him, saved them $500,000, and not have all that morbidity that was associated with the lack of information. Again, I'm just a kid from Nigeria. I mean, what do I know? I'm just a digital immigrant, but I believe if a kid from Nigeria that didn't see technology for 14 years can hopefully play a role in El Paso, Texas, between Texas, United States, and Mexico, I think all of us can play that role. Like I said in the beginning, my name is Ogechika, Alozie, and I'm a digital immigrant. Thank you very much.